Welcome back in, Loons fans, to another edition of the Matchday preview. Jonathan Harrison here once again, joined alongside Manny Lagos, thousands of miles apart though. I am in Minnesota. Manny, you are out in Palm Springs, California for the Coachella Invitational. We'll get to that in a little bit, but Manny, I know it's a little bit earlier for you than it is for me. How are you doing on this fine Monday morning?
Um, I'm looking forward to the week. This is such a special week when you think about it, which is crazy, but we are into the final stretch of preseason. 1 week to go. The guys will have three games here, one that they had yesterday, which was a great result, a great game, really fun to watch live and see some of the tweaks that Eric had put in place, which we might get to a little bit later. And looking forward to the week. Again, it's amazing that by next Saturday, we'll kind of know what the starting lineup for the LAFC game is on the 22nd of February.
Yeah, it's exciting that we are this close already to MLS being back, the MLS regular season being back, and our boys back in action on the pitch. Looking forward to that. We got plenty to discuss here in a bit of a season preview. There's so much to talk about, from MLS transfers, head coaching changes, shifts across the league, transfers in and out, as well as Minnesota United moves in the offseason. So let's jump right into it. We'll start kind of a broader picture, looking at MLS as a whole. MLS transfers, some big ones over the last week or so. Cucho Hernandez out in Columbus, off to Spain to play for Real Betis for around a reported $16 million. A big transfer out for Columbus. That's a big move. Shipping out one of their guys. I know they obviously didn't want to ship out a star player and a key player like that, but that move paired with Christian Ramirez's transfer, are they gearing up for a big transfer in over the next couple days here before the season gets underway in real fashion?
I mean, it's a good question. I don't know if they're prepared in this window to kind of splash the kind of cash they just got for selling Cucho. So maybe it's this window, maybe it's the summer, but you're right. The roster does quickly change offensively with those two guys leaving it. It's a really interesting story. One of the good things about buying a player maybe from Europe at a younger age is that you're going to get a quality player, but you also might get a player that really wants to go back. And probably at this point, Kucher's like, listen, I've won a championship. I've done really well. And I think both sides felt like this is a really good story, which it was. So for me, I think, it'll be interesting to see how Columbus reacts. I think I always love hearing Christian Ramirez's name and his journey, because his journey will always be intertwined with Minnesota and Minnesota United. What a great story. And what a great story that, he's going to go somewhere where, with Ricky Puig out, Devilic leaving, it's the role that he just had in Columbus. I think he's going to have in LA again now. He's going to be asked to sometimes start, sometimes come off the bench, and just help us provide offense, provide stability, provide quality, provide experience. So really happy for him as well.
Yeah, some interesting moves there for Columbus that will certainly shift kind of the landscape of the Eastern Conference. Atlanta United breaking the bank this offseason in a massive way. Emmanuel Latelaf, $22 million fee from Middlesbrough this offseason. Just a huge signing for them, bringing in around north of $50 million in transfers last offseason, starting to spend that in massive ways, kind of shifting the tone of transfers inbound into MLS more so than outbound over the past couple of years, have Atlanta with this move this offseason.
Yeah, and I'm going to be a horrible partner right now, Jonathan, because I'm going to bring up one of the more, I think, bigger stories of outbounds that had a 1 degree of separation.
Yeah.
The Chicago Fire Duran situation.
Yeah.
Was really amazing, and I think it's one of those ones where it's a perfect storm, which I don't know if this happens again for 20 years or who knows. But the reality is, with Duran, being sold for like whatever 18-ish million to Aston Villa from Chicago Fire, and he kind of blew up. But if you look behind the lines, he kind of struggled there. Just his personality, he's still young. He thought he should be playing all the time. There was some tension about tactics with him and the coach. But every time the coach subbed him in, he'd score a wonder goal, and it would be amazing. And so I think it's been like a year and a half now, and I think it was a tension-filled year and a half. And I think Chicago, did great business. They sold him. They kept a little bit of buyout, and I think, maybe he's at 18 now. Maybe he'll go to 40 something, and that they get another percentage of that extra, 20 million. And Next thing you know, Aston Villa sells him to Saudi Arabia for
Insane.
$77 million. This has to be one of the biggest kind of
I think it is the biggest.
yeah, financial windfalls for an MLS team. There's no doubt about it. Obviously, it has Middle East money in it, so it's a little bit different than European money, which I think we're trying to get more into the European channel. Uh, but it was fascinating. Altogether, this is Chicago buying a young kid in the U22 initiative years ago when it just first started, and then they're probably somewhere north of 30 million on the player.
Yeah, it's just an incredible windfall for them. For a club that I know a lot of people around this league have wanted to see do well because it's such a big market that has struggled for so long that if you can get that market going, man, it's going to really hit in really big ways. And we'll see how they reinvest that into the squad. I know with the incoming of Greg Berhalter there in charge of the whole operation, certainly things look to be on the upward trajectory. We'll see how that actually takes place on the field, but that will certainly help them bring in more players this offseason. Another big note this offseason was the change in some of the rules in acquiring players in the league, interleague cash for player transfer trades, which is something that hasn't been done before in this league, but has now been allowed. And we've already seen two instances of it. There's reported interest in a couple other players. And we can talk about that later on. Jack McGlynn to Houston, Dejan Jovelic, as you mentioned earlier on, to Sporting Kansas City. The first two instances of the interleague cash for player trade situation. How do you think that will change how teams operate in transfer windows now within the league itself, instead of having to rely on only swapping GAM or draft picks or international spots? Now they can send straight cash to other MLS teams. That's a huge move for this league that will certainly change the trajectory of transfers in this league.
Yeah, and Jonathan, by the way, we can go back to the ATL one in a second
Yep.
as well. I know that's important, and but this is a potentially a big deal, and everybody's going to have their opinions about where the market goes because this is such a new initiative. And you are right; it got off the ground running right away. Particularly one of our big rivals in the West, Kansas City. If you look at the difference for them saying, "Okay, we're going to go out and grab Polito," and it just didn't quite work, whether it was
Mhm.
injuries or quality in the field. That was a 3 to 4 year experiment of a north of $10 million forward that they tried to make work, and it just couldn't quite elevate their level. And competitively, I probably we were happy about that. We really had some great games against them over the last couple of years. But overall, they looked at the market both outside of the country and they also looked at in MLS, and they were the first team to say, you know what, here's a forward that we know we play against. We know his good and bad qualities. We're going to use money to buy that instead of going outside the market. So it's really fascinating. And the next day, for some reason, I was thinking maybe like older players, and then my brain is like got blown away. Yeah, this could create. And McGlynn's young, but let's talk about second team players. Let's talk about academy players.
Mhm.
There is so much here. We have a transfer window ending, which we'll talk about. We right away next time we start working at our summer window. Our summer window now expands to all of this fishbowl within the MLS family, which it couldn't quite do before because of the kind of trade rules and regulations. So very exciting. And the McGlynn one is fascinating because that's a young player, up and coming national team player. And it's obviously, our Western rival with Houston.
Yeah, and I think from the reporting, this has kind of been a move that has been on the verge of happening for a while with this cash for player transfer swapping ability. And I think it's really good to see. And as you said, it'll open up a lot of different pathways for clubs to add players within the league and move players around within the league more so than they have in the past. As you said, going back to Atlanta, some big moves from them, as you said, Emmanuel Latte, that'll change their striking situation up front. They've had a big offseason, new coach in there as well in Ronnie Delia. How do you think they look this offseason or heading into the season with all the transfers that they've had inbound, the way they ended last season, knocking off Inter Miami in the first round of the playoffs? That was a big move. But they've had a lot of changes this offseason. It'll certainly be an interesting time for Ronnie Delia, who's won MLS Cup in the past with New York City FC coming back into the league now. Certainly some expectations for Atlanta United in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah. I think the $22 million fee is fascinating. Obviously, I still probably for me the Almiron is
Yeah.
it was one of those ones where he really kind of overtook the league. And then I actually cheered for him when he went to Newcastle because I really wanted some of these MLS outbounding transfers to do well. And then, he exceeded expectations. And I think he's kind of like a cult hero at Newcastle now. A lot of that is based on even just the love and energy and effort he put into the game there. And then you can't forget about um, the uh, the Russian who was signed late last year as well. So I think they have three really high level DPs. And again, I think the East, there's a lot of money being spent. There's a lot of cash being splashed around. So I think Atlanta has really come out of the gates with a roster on paper that feels like it should be competing with the top of the East this year.
Is it always is it difficult for a player to come back to a club that they've previously left? Because you don't see that very often in world soccer, where there's those opportunities for a player to come back to a club that they played for at one point, they left via transfer, but now they're coming back. Miguel Almiron, as you said, coming back to Atlanta after going to Newcastle and playing pretty well there over a couple years, now coming back to Atlanta. You don't see that often. Is that difficult for a player to come back into a situation that they used to be in? Or is that just something that just never really happens for other various reasons across soccer?
No, I think there's a lot of players, particularly Europeans, that like to go back to their boyhood clubs to end their
Yeah.
careers. So that's pretty commonplace where you have players finish up at their kind of first club.
Yeah.
Where I think it gets a little bit, kind of like, is it going to work or not? And that's the hard for me because I still think it doesn't matter if you're young or old or getting transferred in this league. You have to have hunger. You have to be hungry to play this game for 90 minutes to not only, commit to your body and your mind and just mentally and physically ready. You have to be committed to making everybody else around you better. And then you have to commit to like the club and their vision and the coaches and their goals. So I I always worry because sometimes you're just a little bit older and it's a little bit harder to commit to that, or it's harder to actually do what you used to do for the club before you left and were kind of sold for a higher value. So, long story short, I go back to it's that hunger is so important for the MLS transfers. That it really is. Like if you're getting a guy who's wants to better themselves, whether they're young or old, more than likely you have a better chance of working out. If you're getting a guy who's coming back because they're nostalgic and they just want life to be easy, uh, you should be a little scared. So there might be some teams in the East that have some of those kind of players too. So which is interesting.
Yeah. Speaking of
I
the
won't
East,
name names right now. It's too early in the season.
that's fair.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Eastern Conference, staying over there, we'll go to the Western Conference and some of the moves that happened in the West this offseason. Another big move, Charlotte bringing in Wilfred Zaha. That's a massive move that I don't think many people saw coming, but Charlotte splashing the cash. I know they were rumored to be in for Miguel Almiron for much of this offseason, ended up not happening because he went to Atlanta, but Wilfred Zaha coming in for Charlotte. That's another big move in the Eastern Conference as the Eastern teams start to stack themselves up, trying to compete with the Inter Miamis and FC Cincinnati's and Columbuses of the world.
Yeah, I think that one's a loan. I could be wrong because I don't know if they actually splashed the transfer fee.
Okay.
You can maybe look that one up, but I think that was a loan.
Yeah, loan. Yep.
Uh, Maybe from Galatasaray
Yep.
because
Yeah. Yeah, it was a loan.
he was bought from Crystal Palace to Galatasaray. Then they loaned him to France. Um, yeah, that one is a good one for me. Where let's see where it goes because I think he could be great. I also could think he had all these great years in Premier League and now he's had two kind of down years.
Mhm.
And is he coming in with that hunger? Again, that is my always my number one question. Is he like, I want to reinvent my career of these two bad years, or if he's like, well, post Premier League hasn't worked twice, two markets. Yes, seems like a good place to go to the beach and hang out. So we'll see. We'll see again. But I do think Charlotte's roster has gotten a lot better, and frankly, there's a lot of teams in the East that have gotten done well,
Yeah.
and the cash is being splashed. And the reality is, there is this guy who's the greatest player in the world in the East that might be pushing the market a little bit more than the West.
And I think, and as you mentioned, Charlotte doing well. I really liked the acquisition of Eric Williamson. I know he's had injury histories in the past, but when he's on, he's a really dynamic, really good midfielder in this league, and he will certainly help them out in Charlotte. Looking forward to seeing that in the Eastern
For sure.
Conference. who do you think improved the most to catch up to Inter Miami, who did finish first in the league in the regular season, won the Supporter Shield, and finished first in the Eastern Conference? Who do you think did the best to catch up to Inter Miami?
Oh, I think it's Atlanta. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's easy. Yeah, not easy. It's debatable, but yes, I would say Atlanta. You?
Yeah, I think Atlanta. I mean, when you splash that kind of cash, obviously, and you bring in a coach with the history and the ability that we've seen Ronnie Delia have in this league, I think you go a long way to helping yourselves out. And we saw how they went toe to toe and even took down Miami in the playoffs. So I think when you bring in the likes of Almiron and you bring in the potential of a guy like Emmanuel Latte, I mean, you certainly do a lot to help yourself out to improve your standing in the Eastern Conference and catch up to the
It,
top of the East.
I agree. I agree. And it's that their depth pieces seem like much better than they have in the last couple of
Yeah,
years. So by the way, speaking of Miami, I really enjoyed watching their preseason. They've done a really good job.
they've been
Obviously, it's more of a
everywhere.
world. They've been everywhere, but the team is probably better this year than last year, more well-rounded. So not only do you have the Messi effect, but I actually think you have a much better team. Now, I don't know if that's going to equate to league points record again. But on paper, I feel like they are a better team this year than last year, which is saying a lot.
How do you think Javier Mascherano does as a first year head coach there? I mean, he's coached his past coaching history, head coaching history is Argentina U23s, and that's it, right? This is his real first coaching
Yes, and
gig.
that's a
So
national team,
yeah,
which
it's
isn't the
different.
day-to-day
Yeah.
management. Great player. He's been around a lot, so I think he's got a big advantage on the understanding of the job and what it takes. I just think again, I gave Miami a compliment because I really truly had been watching some of these preseason games and they looked really good and it still could be fool's gold because it's these sold out stadiums to watch Messi and not necessarily to maybe prepare their roster for what's coming in 2 weeks. But I would say it's fascinating that the staff is very closed in around Messi and his circle. So they were friends. And now he's head coach. Chris Henderson, by the way, we speaking of Atlanta, great
Yeah.
guy, somebody I played with the Olympic team, somebody who I've been friends with forever. Uh, Leaving Miami to go work with Garth. Garth Lagway and Chris worked together for years in Seattle. So, and now I feel like they hired another kind of guy that was really close to Messi for many years. So it's one of those ones where it kind of piques your interest. It might be positive because it's an inner circle that's really tight with Messi and knows Messi. There is a reality that it's a team sport, and it's great because I love Messi, but they're going to need 11 guys plus everybody on that roster to be ready to fight and battle to do it. And you kind of mentioned it, the playoffs kind of snuck and but bit them in the ass. It's even Messi learned last year, excuse me, the playoffs are a different beast.
Yeah.
You got to be ready. You can't kind of limp to the end like a single table. So long story short, um, I think it's great TV this year, Miami, with that, just specifically that, watching Mascherano. Can he deal with the pressure? Can he deal with the stress? Um, is his closest to Messi a positive or is it a negative? Yeah, I love it. I think that they'll be under a lot of pressure to repeat what they did last year, plus go through the playoff run.
At Target, we're ready to cheer with the hometown fans and gear you up for an epic season. Whether watching from the stands or your living room, score big on game day with everything you need for the win. We're here to be your home field advantage at Target and Target.com.
Yeah, I think certainly pressure has kind of stacked up on them with these moves that they have made to kind of solidify themselves around Messi this offseason. Speaking of Mascherano, speaking of Ronnie Delia, the new head coach in a new spot, who you think will be most successful this year? I know that's a
Oof.
lot of head coaches because there was a
Just
number of
coming at me.
changes.
Yeah, there's so
Yeah.
many.
So who's the head coach in the new spot that you think will do the best this season? I can go through them. Robin Fraser in Toronto, Pascal Jensen in New York City FC, Jesper Sorensen in Vancouver, Mascherano, as I said, in Miami, Bradley Carnell moving from St. Louis last season to Philadelphia this offseason, Berhalter, Chicago, Nico Estevez down in Austin now, Olaf Melberg in St. Louis, Bruce Arena in San Jose, and Eric Quill in FC Dallas.
All right. You mentioned
And Daly in Atlanta as well.
oh my gosh, it's so many. It's unbelievable. It really is.
It was ridiculous, the head coaching carousel this offseason.
That is really, really impressive. So I guess I don't think I can answer that, but I want to. And here's what I will say. Some great storylines with the coaching carousel, because it's not just the in and out. Now you've got historically, obviously, the Berhalter post-national team on his own individual journey, which has had some great mountains he's climbed and some great adversity, where I think he's at a point where he probably wants to come back and prove himself after feeling like that was a tough choice to decide not to go with him for the 2026 World Cup. And then he's going to Chicago Fire, who have really for 10 years not had an identity of what they're going to do and how, but they've tried and they've spent a lot of money. So that's an exciting project, exciting to follow. He'll be under a lot of pressure and stress, but he will have a lot of resources and probably a lot of time to kind of build it back up. I'm fascinated with, I'll just go through the list. Eric Quill fascinates me. I played with him in Tampa, young kid who's really, to me, showed that an American who goes about the coaching pathway, goes about trying to just absorb as much of the sport as possible, can end up being an MLS head coach. So I'm really excited about his journey. Robin Fraser, another player I played with, he obviously won the West with the Colorado Rapids. So he took a team that really probably shouldn't have won and did. And then he kind of had a bad year the next year. And so he's had ups and downs, but he's been around forever. I think he'll provide great professional instability in Toronto. Probably the one that excites me the most is the play of Bruce Arena.
Yeah.
Because, we've shared and we've seen the winningest coach in MLS history for many years do this playbook. And, he is going to try to grab talent within the league. He's going to try to grab people he has a relationship and make them the best version of themselves and try to see if that will be the identity for San Jose to kind of change the trajectory of their journey. And it's been a really struggle for them. So I think that's a fascinating one to watch, particularly because, Bruce has pretty much been successful at every time. So, and seeing the offensive players, I know we haven't gotten to the West too much yet, but obviously they've signed some pretty high-level offensive players from the past in the league. And I think Bruce says, thank you very much. I'm fascinated with the Philly one. Obviously, I think replacing an iconic coach like Jim Curtin is a lot of pressure on the sporting director, a lot of pressure on the new head coach, just because I think Jim's really done a good job of getting out a lot of that roster without a lot of resources. So long story short, you brought up something that Austin, signing Dallas as the old coach, crazy. And then, we haven't got the West, but talk about splashing cash. That's a team that reminds me of the Galaxy last year in terms of how much money they spent. So, I think just in itself, we should have a coaches cam at every game now, based on how many new coaches and probably pressure a lot of them will be under right away.
Oh yeah, you mentioned Austin splashing the cash. Plenty of teams did that in the Western Conference. San Jose overhauling their roster, bringing in a bunch of, former New England players, bringing in a bunch of MLS veterans. Joseph Martinez, I think, popping up there as well. Just some incredible players just popping up in San Jose. Chicho Arango heading over there from Real Salt Lake. Real Salt Lake making some big moves. Anderson Julio being traded over to Dallas. Just a lot of big moves in the Western Conference. Who's the most intriguing team? I know you got Seattle there, who traded for Paul Arriola and Jesus Ferreira. There's a bunch of big moves in the Western Conference that are very intriguing to see how these teams try and take down LA Galaxy and get back to the top of the Western Conference before we get into Minnesota.
I think probably Dallas is the one team you're still waiting to see like where they evolve, because you brought up Seattle, and Seattle really said, there's some really good American national team talent in Dallas that looks like both sides maybe were like, wow, we want them. And Dallas is like, we have to rebuild and rebrand here. So long story short, Dallas is maybe the one team where I'm like, okay, where are they heading still? It seems like they're still kind of going to evolve their roster. Certainly you brought up Boston. A really good center midfielder, good attacker. Like they've really are trying to kind of evolve from where they were the last couple of years, no doubt about it. I think we brought up San Jose. That is really, really intrigued with Chicho, and just it'll be. I think Martinez won't be a starter, but you never know. Like I said, maybe he's somebody who would work well with Chicho. I'm not sure. Maybe they would share the load. It is really hard to pick one team. I do think the LA teams are also in an interesting place where I think the Galaxy rebuilt and won. Congratulations, but Ricky Puig is out for the year, so they have to think about how they're going to play with one of the better players in the MLS missing for their team for a year. And and then I think the LAFC, our first opponent, sold Bogusz, which in some ways surprised people. Other ways they might have some more reloading to do still. So really fascinating. Where are you at that? Or Jonathan, where are you at that? What's the team that intrigues you the most in terms of their activity in the offseason?
I think Seattle, to see how it all fits together with some of the U.S. men's national team's players all kind of playing on the same team in Seattle, and seeing if they can get back to or continue their dominance at the top of the Western Conference. I'm really intrigued to see how that all fits together. And
hey, by the way, just a quick, not a non sequitur, but did you know in NASL one year there was a Team America?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
to
good.
prepare for,
right.
Was it to prepare for the Olympics or the World Cup? Let's prepare
But
for the World Cup, right? This is where we need Marthal, because he's the historian among us.
Yeah,
all.
no, I think it was to prepare for the 1980 Olympics.
Yeah. Okay.
That didn't happen because we pulled out.
Yeah.
Or they pulled out. Wait.
It's an interesting
84 was in
experiment.
LA. Maybe it was the 84 LA Olympics. Maybe that was it. Yeah.
It's an interesting experiment, putting together your national team as a club team and seeing if it can work out and bringing that form into international.
Yeah, I would say it's much better experiment now than it was decades ago. Those guys were all college kids at the time, and that was all part of that Miracle on Ice, era. So, anyways, okay, go back. I think for me,
I think for me, it's Seattle. Seeing how that works out. LAFC. I want to see how. I have really liked Jeremy Ebobisse coming into the league and seeing how he's developed across his teams. And I'm really intrigued to see how he fits into that LAFC lineup and seeing how he can apply his trade and his skill set into that LAFC lineup, see if he can provide an attacking threat up there, where it seemed like they might have struggled at times outside of Bouanga and Bogusz. It never really felt like Giroud really got settled in there last season. I'm really intrigued to see how.
Yeah, that would be my question to you. Well, can Giroud do it? Like, can he
for an entire
make
season
an impact? Well, can he just do it for a couple games? Not trying to. He really didn't play very well. I don't think there was a lot of impactful games he had, and he ended up being there for quite a bit of their season. So you're right. Listen, that I still believe that's where it's really kind of fascinating. This is the first time the Galaxy are ruling that town in several years. So it'll be interesting to see how they react on the field, or interesting how they try to build back up that roster to be competitive. Yeah. It's exciting because, like I said, we play them on the 22nd. I think it's a great time to play them. By the way, first game of the year.
Yeah.
We are looking, very similar to last year, plus adding these great pieces that are really complementary. So it's exciting for us. I think it's an exciting start. I'm not going to too much. Where again, I think the West is a little bit different than the East in terms of uncertainty of some of the clubs this year, and we're one of the ones I think has more certainty.
Yeah, a lot of stability, but a couple new players. We'll jump into that now. A lot of excitement for Minnesota United over these two players. Let's start with the young center back, Nicholas Romero, left-footed defender, experienced for being only 21 years old, likely a Tapias replacement, but the big note, as I said, left-footed defender, that'll certainly be key in that three-man center back line. in Eric Ramsey's system will certainly help allow, I would imagine, Jefferson Diaz to move back over to the right side where he's a right-footed center back. That'll certainly help align those guys a little bit more specifically. But getting a left-footed defender is key, and a 21-year-old at that, impressive as well. I'm excited to see what this kid can bring. What's your scouting report on Nicholas Romero from Minnesota
Yeah,
United?
really good 1v1 defender, lockdown, again, for his age, the amount of minutes he's played. He's only been at one club, which I actually like because now he's like, I think I'm ready to kind of explore the rest of the world a little bit more. Gritty, but also, good passer. Like I said, and he's still building into what the overall arching identity of a center back he's going to be. Particularly at 21, it's always hard to say you're finished products. You're almost never. It's very rare. But I really like where we're going with this signing because it's an acknowledgement of needing depth, needing growth this year, but it also has a little bit tinge of we've got to start, making sure we're ready to kind of elevate our identity in the future. And again, I don't think we're happy with getting to the playoffs and just getting knocked out and then saying we had a good year. We are trying to build a roster to win championships and trophies, both short and long term. And I think this one has a little bit of elements of both, which gets you excited because it just adds potentially starter, potentially depth, but just young and somebody who I think is going to add a little grit to the roster, frankly, particularly on the defensive side. So excited about the signing. And he also hails from Pereira's home club, Tucumán. So those two really had, I think, 3 years together, which is a good amount of time.
Speaking of bringing in someone that has kind of a familiarity with someone on the team, at least in nationality wise, forgive me if I mispronounce this wrong, preseason for all of us, still working on it. Hoyoung Jung, midfielder from South Korea, was the K-League Young Player of the Year in 2023, 24 years old. How does he fit into the midfield that I know we talked about on the season wrap-up show back in December? Midfield and defense were kind of the two areas that you'd be looking at in the offseason to kind of bolster. How does he fit in to what Eric Ramsey wants in that midfield?
Yeah, really exciting to kind of get another player who's a little bit more seasoned. I think he was Young Player of the Year in 23 in Korea. Two-way, can just get all over the field. We probably had a player like Arriaga, but maybe not the same bite defensively. But I think there's going to be some quality and composure along with even more work rate. And I thought Arriaga got down around the field pretty well than Arriaga. So this is a kid I think that just adds to where we're going with our center midfield for both the short term and again, a long term, but really specifically even the short term this year. We need everything. We need to continue to build guys who are going to come in and rotate or continue to kind of complement Hassani and Will, and even when Joaquin's in there and when Lode's in there. And I think we've got a kid who's at a great age. Once again, who's only been at one other club and really wanted to come here. So I brought up that word hunger. It's to me a great signing because I think we have somebody who's hungry to be in MLS. And I think we're looking for the kind of values and qualities that he's going to bring to the field.
How important is that, going back to Romero, tying that in as well, having a guy on the team that you're transferring into that you can kind of rely on to help you transition to the new area? Hoyan has Songbin, two South Koreans who have, according to some good reporting from Marthaler and Andy Greeter in their interviews, they've kind of helped each other out in getting, or Songbin has helped him out getting acclimated to the area and getting ready for this transition to Minnesota. Nicholas Romero previously teaming up with Joaquin Pereira. How important is that to have a player like that, a fellow player like that, on your new team as you transition to a new squad?
Oh, I just think it's so important as long as you have a good culture and you're doing things the right way. And, again, those guys are hopefully believing in our vision, what we're doing. And they're telling us, hey, this is a great club. This is a club that cares. This is a club that wants to build and grow for you guys and for you to get better and for you to kind of have a great career. So I really do think probably even more with the Koreans. There is a reality of just it's such two different cultures, and having Sang-bin here for Zhong is I think is so important, just because that can be tough on anybody going from one culture to another one like this. So that one probably feels like it has more impact because it is hard. I mean, those are two
Yeah.
really extreme cultures where um, the South Americans still sometimes have trouble, but we have a lot of South Americans. Spanish is a great second language even for a lot of Minnesotans. So I would say, and I do think Zhang speaks a little less English than Sang Bin did when he came. So it's great that they're here together. It's just outstanding. So again, really looking forward to it. Two really, really impactful, fun signings that just feel like they're going to elevate the group from where we were last year, and the depth and or starters that we've needed to continue to evolve and get better.
I know we've only got a couple minutes left, but I do want to end off on some more positivity. 6-0 for the Loons yesterday in a first game in the Coachella Invitational over Sporting Kansas City. Granted, Sporting Kansas City, a heavily rotated squad as they prepare for the CONCACAF Champions Cup. A very young Sporting Kansas City squad, but still MNUFC with a number of their key starters on the field, putting up 6 on Sporting Kansas City yesterday. How impressive was that?
So much to talk about. Like it really was again, we are building. We have two more games now, and then we started up LAFC, and we got to be ready to go and firing. I think we showed last year how important even early starts are to you really making the playoffs. So in my world, yesterday going to the game was fascinating. It was really fun to watch. Outstanding game. I mean, the goal explosion in the first half was important, but it was also just how we went about playing against a team that maybe didn't have a lot of their first team guys in the roster, but we still really just won balls in good spots, attacked with energy. Some of my highlights of the game yesterday probably starts with him playing Tani and Kelvin together up top and really seeing if those two could connect and coordinate together. And holy cow, they look great. I mean,
Yeah.
they were really running for each other, run off each other, creating space. If I move around the field, a lot of compliments, by the way, just watching the game live. Joseph Rosales was outstanding just from the start to really dominating. Obviously, Bongi had a solid game. I thought Joaquin looked really sharp and impactful. Obviously, Asani and Will, steady as ever. So they looked really fit and ready and hungry to kind of get ready for our first game. And then I thought a nice surprise was Dugan in there. I thought he did a really good job. And, with Diaz out for the first game with a red card, it was nice to see Eric thinking about how he's going to solve that problem. Romero is still on visa and he might be here soon and he might be ready for his game. He might not. And obviously Devin's another one who's coming and done really well there. So it was a really fun, fascinating game yesterday. Outstanding performance. So couldn't say more compliments about how we played yesterday.
Yeah, 2 goals, 2 assists for Tani Oluwaseyi, 2 goals and an assist for Kelvin Yaboa. Both those guys assisting each other on a goal apiece. As you said, Joaquin Pereira having himself a game, assisting on the first goal, helping that ball towards the net on the own goal. A couple minutes later, I thought Joaquin Pereira stood out to me as having a really solid game, looking a lot more comfortable than he did after first coming over last season, and that's good to see. That's exciting to see that his comfort level, at least from watching on a stream 1,000 or so miles away, looked a little bit more comfortable than he did last year, and that's an exciting prospect for this season. You spoke about the 2-striker system and having both those guys on the field at the same time. How does that how is that going to? I don't want to give away too much of the tactical details before the first game of the season, but how do you think that changes how this team operates in the attack going forward with both those guys on the field at the same time heading into the season?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it's a little bit different. If you think about it, if teams are playing with 2 center backs, there's a matchup there where it's 2v2, or it could be 2v4, depending on how the outside backs tucks in if they're playing the back 4. So it's really important for those 2 guys to be hungry to work together, though. That's where this gets really exciting, is that they need to kind of not occupy the same spaces because they both have played a lot in a 1 forward system. with kind of two wingers. So they're going to really have to get excited, which I thought they did a great job yesterday. One checking into the ball, the other one checking into the channel. So you're really pushing that back line. You're hungry to get in and find spaces. And the other guy, doesn't just, when he checks the ball, he just doesn't stop. He then turns, he goes, I got to get into the box. I got to start creating spaces. And like I said, that kind of movement allows somebody like Joaquin Pereira to go find a third man through for triangles. It now gets Joe and Bongi excited to get up the field so we have more numbers in the attack. And if you even saw in that first half, Asani had some nice, really good run throughs. And I missed a really great chance, I think, where he had a great first touch and just missed it wide. But long story short, it did start with those two for me in terms of, if it goes the opposite way where they're occupying the same space, we're not getting the ball out. We're not moving in good spots. And then certainly it's infectious. Will Trapp had a really good, solid game where he's like, this is great. Now I will clean everything up. If they're coming out, I'm going to win the ball back. And next thing you know, we really dominated possession. Our repress and our recovery balls were really, really, really solid. It was an overwhelming first half. And really, I just thought it looked steady and gets me excited. I don't know if we're going to always play at the 2 forward system because you got to have some of those spaces, but certainly Tani and Calvin looked hungry to play together really well yesterday.
2 more games left in the Invitational. LA Galaxy on Wednesday at 1 p.m. Central Time, and then New York City on Saturday at 4 p.m. Central Time. Both those games streamed live on MNUFC.com. Go watch that when those games are played to see your boys in action coming up later this season. As these 2 games come up, what is the coaching staff hoping to see throughout the rest of the tournament? What are the important factors they're looking for as we get closer to the start of the regular season coming up next week?
Yeah, I think it's 2 things. It's gonna be, they've got to focus on what group they want to start on the 22nd and to make sure we're as good as we can be to be ready for that. That's a little bit why Diaz didn't probably start yesterday over and we got to see Dugan. But I don't want to understand that there is a model here where I'm not sure how many minutes the first team guys will get on Wednesday versus the second team guys. And it's certainly the first team guys, this Saturday game coming up will get a lot of minutes. They've got to get some fitness and make sure they're game ready for 90 minutes. So I really love this week of training for the second team guys because they will be getting some minutes this Wednesday. And it's important that we get excited about the depth, and we've got some really good young guys. You saw Luik came in. I think this is a great time for Sang Bin because he's not maybe in the starting group, but he might come in for Tani or Kelvin and really be ready to be part of that 2 forward system in a way that's 20 minutes of his speed. He's one of the fastest players in the league. I get excited about it. So there's a lot of really hard work training this week, I think, for the second team guys, partly because the first team guys get a lot of the love, but the coaches are still really focused on making sure they're ready too. So it'll be an interesting one. It'll really be, I think, a really good week of training, a good week for the first team guys to get ready for the 22nd, and for our second team guys to kind of be in and around where they really have to have a good week, an impactful week, so the coaches know that they're ready if they're called off the bench, or we know as the reality of the season, we're going to need everybody, and we're going to need guys to come off the bench. We're going to need guys to fight and maybe win starting spots because that's a reality too. We didn't bring up Load, who came in the second half. He's obviously dealt with a little bit of under the weather and some other stuff. So, but he's another one where I know by the beginning of the season, just with his experience, he'll be ready to go.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to watch these 2 games coming up this week, but more importantly, looking forward to the season opener coming up in a couple Saturdays time out in LA against LAFC. Manny, appreciate talking to you today. Appreciate your insight into the team. We'll talk to you next week as we get back underway with weekly match day previews, preparing you for every single game this season for Minnesota United. Looking forward to talking to you all again this season, Manny. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I am too, Jonathan. Appreciate it. And I apologize. I do get a little bit overly excited this week because this is the build-up of what the team potentially could look like. Now, that could be one game. And, by the time we get to Montreal at home on the first, it could be a totally different one. But there is a nice vibe, nice culture with this group. And I mentioned the steadiness and the kind of roster has some newness to it, which is important, but it also has some great experience. Boxall was outstanding again yesterday. Harvey had some really nice minutes and touches. Dane didn't have a lot to do, so I didn't even mention those guys as well. So there is a nice steadiness to this group. I think the group is getting a lot more respect than it did last year going into the season in the Western Conference, and ultimately, it's nice to hear that, but we know, and we have enough veterans that know you actually have to do it on the field. So this is a big week of training to get ready for it. So let's go.
Looking forward to it. Good stuff from you today, Manny. Thank you to the production staff of Grace Dearson, Kyle Hayward, and Evan Entler for putting this on every week. And Loons fans, we'll talk to you next week with another match day preview right here on the podcast feed. Talk to you then.